Welcome into this edition of the Roundtable. Bill Priestley here with you, and we're going to have a little bit of discussion about truck prices. And this is not gas prices, as you may have seen, of course, a chart that looks fairly similar to that as well. But we're going to have a couple of experts talk about the recent rise in truck prices and what could possibly be a very clear fall coming up in the very near future. Donnie Gilbert joining us here shortly, but also Alan Adler joining us, our Detroit bureau chief. And Alan, you can take a look at the chart here. Obviously, this is recent history, but one that for the truck buyer looks very bad. Can you kind of take us through a little bit of this in terms of how we got from really moderate prices to basically for a used truck triple the amount?
Well, Bill, good morning. I think a couple things are at play here. The used trucks, essentially the prices follow what happens with new trucks. We've had this tremendous holdback on used truck production because of semiconductors and because of what some call the everything shortage. We've had supply chain disruptions for all kinds of parts, but led pretty much by semiconductors. And what that's done is it's put this tremendous pressure on the production of new trucks. And so fleets that have trucks that would typically be trading them at 4 and 5 years are holding on to them longer because they cannot get new trucks to the extent that they want them. Now, I know that we're entering possibly a freight recession, and those come because we have a very, very tight cycle, right? I mean, 2 years in and out, we're almost out of a cycle before we ever know we're in it. So the issue right now is strictly demand and supply, not supply and demand. That is, the demand for these trucks, new trucks first and used trucks second, is so high that it has driven prices, as you point out there, through the roof. We may beginning to see some moderation in this now. It starts at the auctions first, and then a couple months later, it's followed at retail. So you may start to see some of the hot air come out of this, but generally, we still have a tremendous pent-up demand for new trucks, and that's creating a paucity, if you will, in terms of what's available in the used market.
I remember seeing an article that you wrote a couple of months ago that one used truck, as you had it penned up, I believe, north of $240,000 at auction.
Yeah, and again, equipment dictates a lot of that, but also, this idea that people can't afford these trucks. Got to remember the freight environment, Bill, that we're coming out of right now, and I know it's calmed down quite a bit. But when you're getting $3 and $4 a mile, and this was before the huge run up in diesel, you're throwing off a lot of cash, and if that means I've got to spend that cash on equipment, I'll do it. And so you get in these auctions, and I imagine it's like some of the eBay auctions I'm in, where people just come in at the end and swipe the auction from you. So I think what you've got there is just a question of, hey, I've got the money, I need the truck. There's spot demand out there, and again, I'm going back a month or so. Demand is obviously slowing down now, but at the same time, you've got this demand for equipment. You've got fleets that want new equipment because you run into maintenance costs the longer you hold on to a truck, and the idea of these trade cycles is you put that off on the second owner, right? I mean, there may be a little bit of warranty left, but typically they're kind of on their own once the second owner gets to the truck. So, you've seen a few blips here and there where, maybe some used prices are starting to come down, but J.D. Power Valuation Services, which is somebody we watch very carefully monthly on used truck pricing, basically says it's probably the end of the year before we see anything really significant in terms of what would you call it, a reversion to mean, perhaps, where prices would come back down. I think on the new truck side, we've got to be aware, though, that this pent-up demand, probably north of 100,000 units that fleets want. Some of that may be coming out as things slow down and we switch from a goods to a service economy, and consequently, like with Target saying they've got too much inventory, and others probably will follow with that. You may not need quite as many tractors and trailers, but there's still a tremendous demand out there, and there's some other factors too.
Donnie, this is your chart. You like to bring this up quite a bit on the carrier updates sometimes. Obviously, we've seen a massive influx, but it's not just demand, right? This also has to do with the rental market. What else is involved in here?
Let's drop back to 2018. 2018 was a boom year. And we see it kind of picking up here a little bit through 2018, but lasting all the way halfway, a little bit over halfway through 2019. Rumors get out. Uncle Bob's cousin Joe is driving a truck and making $1 million. So you get an influx of people starting to come into the market. And of course, as that happens, the demand for trucks goes up, the rates go up. And we see that here in this bump from 2018 through almost 2020. And then it dropped back down, normalized. Now, you see this line right here is significantly different.
Yes.
That's because we had the same issue here, except we had a collision with a lot of other problems. Now, let's look at the brand new truck market. We had issues with auto parts getting to the factories. We had trouble with the chips. Therefore, here, there's a cycle of about 6 months to get your new trucks. Well, that was pushed out to a year, maybe a year plus. Now, the cycle of these used, how the trucks get to the used market, where we see this, and the reason we measure 3-year-old used truck prices is typically fleets will buy brand new trucks. They'll run them for about 3 to 4 years, normally around the 3-year mark, and they'll turn them over to the used market because they want to keep their fleets fairly young because that's what their shippers demand. Well, you can't get your new trucks, but you can't just go out and sell your old trucks. You have to have them because you're not getting that flow. So the flow is cut off here. So they're having to hold on to their used trucks a little bit longer. And there, the rates are jumping up and everybody's trying to rush in and buy used trucks, but the used truck aren't hitting the market like they should. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like tornado hits volcano. And here rates are shooting up and therefore supply and demand, these start jumping, the used truck price starts jumping up. We're having other problems. Your older trucks, they're breaking down. You can't get parts for them. They're sitting at shops. Well, people are kind of interested in upgrading to these newer trucks to keep their trucks on the road, less issues. So all this kind of combining together has pushed this up, and 60, 70 grand would have probably been the average rate for a 3-year-old truck, and we've pretty much doubled to 140, but also new trucks have also skyrocketed in prices as well for the same reasons.
Let's get to the real meat of the question here. Obviously, we've been talking about freight recession for at least a few months now, and you see this number going up, it's starting to level off. You would think that with freight recession, with the capacity not necessarily there, that the demand would possibly drop. That's going to drop the price. We're starting to see that. What do you see forecasting-wise? And as Alan said, we may not see a revert to the mean until maybe the end of the year.
All right, so I think it might be just a little bit quicker than that because we talked to Henry earlier in the show. We saw what he was predicting on imports and the damage that could happen in 30 to 40 days. I've always been talking about after the 4th of July, and if that supply and demand starts to dry up, which has kind of already slowed down a little bit, I think this is going to start to come down. I think banks are going to quit loaning money for one, because rates are going to start coming down and diesel fuel so high, their costs are so high. I think they're going to be a lot higher risk loans for people trying to buy borrow over 100 grand to buy a truck. So I think this number, when it updates next month, is going to start trending down slightly, and I think it's going to come down pretty soon through probably through August and September.
Alan, let me switch back to you here momentarily. I know this may be too early to ask right now, but obviously we're talking about new trucks, diesel trucks, used trucks in that same category. With these price fluctuations, is this going to hit the EV market as those trucks start to come online?
Well, let me add one more thing, if I could, Bill, before we get to talk about EVs, okay. And that is that we have environmental changes coming in 2024, January 1st of 2024, which is going to create sort of a pre-buy, if you will, on existing trucks, on the current trucks. So that might be, based on how many states have adopted California's tougher regulations, there's 6 right now, you might see 20% of the people that are buying trucks, the fleets buying trucks, will pull ahead those purchases if they can. So I think the pressure is going to remain on the used truck market for longer. Yes, I think you've got to look at some of these near-term things that Donnie describes, but you also have to look at your kind of stronger, longer market, which is the way the CEO of PACCAR put it last week when they had their annual meeting. And of course, that's Peterbilt and Kenworth. They believe that it's going to be a pretty good market for a while. The other thing too is that when we talk about spot rates coming down, that's true, but the contract rates are locked in. Now, the new contracts might be a little less, but most of our freight is moved by contract, not by spot. So I think we pay a lot of attention to spot rates, but the contracts are there, and a lot of these big fleets, big shippers, have some certainty in what they're going to be doing. On the EV side, interestingly enough, we saw some of the EV trucks, the Class 8 trucks, get pulled ahead in terms of build, and some of the semiconductor allocation went to them because we've got both sort of sustainability goals for some of the customers that, they want these trucks, and then we also have regulations. You can begin to book your fuel credits, your low carbon fuel credits and things like that as soon as you get these trucks. There's also a ton of grant money available. Right now, we'll be writing about that Friday in Truck Tech, from California, that'll basically offset about a third of the cost of a new truck. The big trick is going to be getting the trucks. And we've seen the manufacturers really hold the screws down tightly on how many orders they'll accept, because they're not going to overpromise and underdeliver like they did in 2021.
So real quick, as we kind of wrap things up here, let me ask you both, over the course of the next year and a half, if you're in the market to buy a truck, be it new, be it used, how long do you wait? Do you want to see this line drop a bit? Do you want to see it drop a lot before you invest in a new vehicle?
So I was on social media last night, and I saw a guy was selling his dually because he's going to go from hot shot into the semi market. He's going to start driving a semi now instead of running loads on his dually. And I simply answer back, do not buy a truck right now. Give it a few months. If I was in the market right now, you're buying at the peak. And I do feel that, especially when you're starting off new as an owner-operator, you're probably going to be a little bit more exposed to the spot market than contract as you build your business up. So right now is not the time to buy a used truck.
Okay. Alan, what do you think people are?
Yeah, I think the people that took out authorities, that are either reactivated or took out authorities to drive a truck, that number's probably coming down. I don't have any data on that myself, but my guess is that, yes, I agree with Donnie. It is the peak right now. We'll see certainly some moderation over the next few months. And I think what we've got to see is, when are we going to get enough of these semiconductors that we can get some new builds made and get that back up again? That will infuse some trucks into the used market, and that, more than anything else, will bring prices down.
Gentlemen, it's been an interesting discussion. It's going to be interesting to see where this line goes in the next 6 months to a year. Thanks so much for your participation. We'll take a short break, and we'll come back and wrap up the show right after this.